Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and murderous cannibals hoping to chop you up. I'm Noah Hook, and today we're looking at the remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Turd, you're so dead you don't even know it.
This 2003 horror film has a lot of the same bones as the original, following a group of young adults who come across Leatherface and his murderous clan while traveling through Texas. Only this group likes Lynyrd Skynyrd and has more sex appeal. This time around, Leatherface is a big, mean, scary killing machine, and his cruel family members like Sheriff Hoyt are nearly as terrifying. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was the first franchise purchased by Michael Bay's company Platinum Dunes. They'd also go on to remake the Amityville Horror, The Hitcher, The Unborn, Friday the 13th, and A Nightmare on Elm Street before switching gears and focusing on new series like The Purge and A Quiet Place. But this is basically the film that started the remake trends of the 2000s. The Platinum Dunes remakes are largely disliked for various reasons, but of all their films, this is one of the ones with the most appreciation. The film was directed by Marcus Nispel, who would go on to bring us the Friday the 13th and Conan remakes. Bro loves remakes. This was his feature-length debut, but he had a long-time career in music videos and commercials. He was actually a frequent collaborator with Daniel Pearl, who shot the original TCM, and he was the one who encouraged him to pursue the project. The screenplay was written by Scott Kosar of films like The Machinist and The Crazies remake. That's actually a really good remake. He knew he was recreating one of the genre's most seminal creations, so he knew the best approach was to make a pretty different version of the same story. So instead of name-for-name carbon copies of Sally, Franklin, and the OG gang, the remake gives us a similar but different cast of characters. The film stars Jessica Biel from Blade Trinity as Erin, Jonathan Tucker from The Ruins as Morgan, Erica Learson from Wrong Turn 2 as Pepper, Eric Balfour from Backcountry as Kemper, and Michael Vogel from Cloverfield as Andy. And this once again marks another rebranding of Leatherface and his killer family, who have been renamed the Hewitts this time around. Leatherface is played by Andrew Bernarski from Batman Returns and Pearl Harbor, and he brings a new level of anger and intensity to the character. His family is played by Arlie Ermey from Full Metal Jacket as Sheriff Hoyt, David Dorfman from The Ring as Jedediah, Terrence Evans from Pale Rider as Monty, and Marietta Merrick from Simple Men as Luda May. The film was shot in Austin just like the original, with Daniel Pearl returning as cinematographer. The score was composed by Steve Jablonsky, who's worked on a ton of Platinum Dunes projects, and the soundtrack features a lot of 90s metal. There was something in the air at the time that made people want to see this because the TCM remake made over $100 million at the box office, so on a measly $9 million budget, it was a booming success. It was met with mixed reviews from critics though. Some really appreciated the polished, fast-paced, brutal approach of the remake, while others just found it to be a soulless cash grab. Roger Ebert even gave it a rare 0 out of 4 stars. It currently has a 37 and 58% on Rotten Tomatoes, along with a 3 on Letterboxd, so it's remained a pretty divisive film over the past 20 years. I'm somewhere in the middle when it comes to this one. I definitely think it's one of the better horror remakes we've gotten, and one of the better Texas Chainsaw films, but neither of those are especially impressive accomplishments on their own. But I do think it has some really strong elements, and it's been at least a year or two since I've seen it, so I'm excited to revisit it now that I've recently watched all the previous films. But hey, with all of that said, it's probably time we get started. Maybe don't pick up any hitchhikers today, because we're watching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. The movie opens with some faux 70s police footage of a crime scene, which OG narrator John Larroquette is happy to inform us about.
For them, an idyllic summer afternoon became a nightmare.
The Hewitt family terrorized Travis County for a decade before being discovered, with the police capturing 1,300 pieces of evidence. This includes police footage of a walkthrough of this house of horrors, but more on that in a little while. This takes us to the event that ultimately led to their discovery, which involved a group of hot young adults heading to a Lynyrd Skynyrd concert. The group consists of country girl Erin and her boyfriend Kemper, single dude Morgan, their friend Andy, and a hitchhiker named Pepper that he's getting real familiar with.
We didn't even know each other yesterday.
The crew is returning from a trip to Mexico where Erin was disappointed that Kemper didn't try to put a ring on it. She's also pissed to learn the boys smuggled 2 pounds of pot over the border in this very inconspicuous piñata. Back in the 70s, that basically made you a drug lord. They nearly crush a woman wandering around in the road, and despite the boys' protest, the girls offer to drive her home. But it soon becomes clear that this is a situation they're not equipped for.
He's really bad.
She warns that they're heading towards the bad man and says she won't go back, and she bids these kind folks adieu by pulling out her Saturday night special.
I'm gonna die.
Grab it!
Yeah, this video's definitely getting age restricted, but at least this shot is fucking dope. The group is obviously traumatized by this tragedy, and they debate whether or not they should alert the authorities. Fellas, yeah, you should alert the authorities. Like, I understand the weed piñata, but God. Kemper yeets the piñata and assures Erin they're gonna do the right thing though. They come across a barbecue/gas station and pull over to find some help, and the owner, Luda May, calls up the sheriff. Things are immediately sus when they learn the sheriff wants them to meet him by some old mill in 2 hours, and they're expected to just deliver this corpse to him. But without any real alternatives, they head off to this random ass mill. The boys want to dump her body here and get out of Dodge, but Erin convinces Kemp that this girl deserves better than that. They explore the decrepit yet decorated shack for the sheriff, but all they find is a possum and this dirty little guy. This is Jedediah, and despite appearances, he's actually pretty chill.
Promise you won't hurt me.
He tells them that the sheriff is likely at home getting his buzz on, but fortunately he lives nearby. Erin and Kemper head over to the bizarre combination of brutalism and plantation-style architecture that is supposedly the sheriff's home. But when they arrive, they're greeted by this guy, Monty. He's a double-leg amputee and says the sheriff don't live here, but he allows just Erin inside to call him. She rings up the station and confirms that the sheriff is on his way, but on her way out, Monty apparently needs help getting back into his chair. Right. Kemp gets impatient and lets himself in. He comes across some pigs, a sewing station, some good old cartoons, and a big old Leatherface with an axe. He drags Kemper into his subterranean meat locker, and it's the last time we're gonna see him alive. But not the last time we're gonna see him. This commotion is Erin's cue to leave, and she assumes Kemper simply left and rejoined the others. Meanwhile, Sheriff Hoyt has finally made it to the crime scene.
Excuse me, you mind getting the fuck out of my way, son?
He's a mean, nasty son of a bitch, and based off the fact he's making them wrap up this body in saran wrap, I'm guessing he ain't exactly the blues finest.
She ain't gonna bite you, she's deader than a goddamn doornail. Get a hold of her and pick her up.
He tosses the poor woman into his trunk and heads off.
Protect and serve, that's what we do.
And Leatherface gets to work on his newest craft project. Aw man, it looks like that poor bastard really was gonna propose. Erin joins the others only to realize Kemp isn't with them, and a blaring car horn attracts them out to a field of abandoned cars. They find some teeth as well as a jar with Hitchhiker Girl's picture in it. Yeah, it's looking like her whole family got eaten. And don't even ask what's in that jar, nobody wants to know. Erin and Andy return to Monty's to find Kemp, with her serving as a distraction while he sneaks in. Leatherface watches as he examines the skin drying room, and Andy checks out the fridge. Oh, that smell. Can't you smell that smell? He knocks something over and gets Monty's attention, and he is not happy.
Bring it!
He bangs his cane to summon their attack dog. Hey, what's up, Leatherface? Andy gets knocked down and temporarily fends off his chainsaw with a tire iron, and he gets chased by Leather through a dreaded gaggle of drying sheets. Leatherface cuts him off in more ways than one and takes him downstairs, while Erin sprints back to the van. Unfortunately, she gets there just as Hoyt returns, and before she can explain what happened, the sheriff spots a doobie.
You kids taking drugs?
Meanwhile, poor fucking Andy has been stuck on a meat hook, salt cured, and wrapped in butcher's paper. Then Leather makes the finishing touches on his handsome new face. Hoyt gets the three of them on the ground and fires a shot very close to Erin's head. He pulls Morgan inside the van to give him a step-by-step breakdown of what really happened. Hoyt forces him to replicate how the hitchhiker shot herself, but before he can make Morgan pull the trigger, he gives the sheriff the old Uno reverse.
You motherfucker! Get on the fucking floor!
But Hoyt ain't no simple man and saw that coming, so sadly for Morgan there was nothing in the chamber.
Oh my God,
We
Morgan!
got ourselves a killer. Only this time, you killed the sheriff.
Hoyt pulls a gun of his own and escorts his cop killer to the police station, but not before smashing a bottle into his face.
Oh, that was really rude, wasn't it?
He loses a few teeth, and Hoyt's excited to see they have that in common now. He also radios over to Leatherface to finish off the girlies at the mill and beats the shit out of Morgan before bringing him inside their home. Erin manages to hotwire the van, but their escape attempt is halted when Leatherface and his chainsaw arrive. Pepper makes a run for it but gets cut down, and her down coat fills the air with feathers. Ooh, and it's here that Erin realizes the horrifying fate her almost fiancé suffered. She goes through one of the franchise's standard woodland chase scenes, which brings her to this unassuming trailer. It's inhabited by this gaunt queen named Henrietta and this plump queen known as the Tea Lady. And they don't call her that for nothing either. These girls love some fucking tea.
Nothing a good old cup of tea won't settle.
Black tea, chamomile, ginseng, you name it, we got it down here at Tea Lady's Tea Trailer Emporium. Oh yeah, and they ain't worried about Leatherface either.
Poor sweet boy.
Sweet boy.
We learn he developed a skin disease as a little boy, which I suppose explains why he's currently wearing Kempers. They force some tea down her gullet and Henrietta tends to a crying baby. But just as Erin realizes they were lying about not having a phone and that Henrietta has stolen the hitchhiker's baby,
That's not your baby. You stole her!
she starts feeling a little woozy. It must be that melatonin tea, it knocks me right out every night. Erin wakes in the Hewitt House of Horrors where the whole family is gathered. Luda May chastises her and her kind as they would always make fun of her boy when he was little. They call in Leatherface, whose actual name is Thomas, and he tosses her down into the basement. Oh hey Andy, how's it hanging? She desperately tries to get him down, but only ends up hurting him more, and he begs her to put him out of his misery. It takes some convincing, but Erin ultimately stabs her friend in the gut. Realistically, that would not be a quick kill at all, but it gets the job done here. Next, she comes across Morgan in a tub, and he's in slightly better shape. Jedediah shows up to help them escape, which is Leather's cue to come bursting in with his saw. He chases them through some tunnels below the house, and they manage to reach the surface thanks to the little dirty boy. They hobble through the car graveyard and into an abandoned home, but Leatherface is hot on their trail. The windows are all barred shut, so they each find a hiding spot, but they don't know that Bubba is a 3-time hide-and-seek champ. He prepares to cut Erin in half, but Morgan, who at every turn has been taking the cowardly, self-preserving option, finally mans up and tackles Leatherface. Sadly, the poor guy is still handcuffed, so Leatherface is able to use a chandelier as a makeshift meat hook to hang him. He gets finished off with some Terrifier treatment. We have another woodland chase scene, but this one ends with Leatherface tripping and cutting himself just like in the original. She comes across a slaughterhouse, which has shockingly never been used as a location in this franchise until now. She narrowly avoids Leatherface again and winds up in a big ol' storage freezer full of cattle, most of which are actually real. The two play another game of hide and seek that Leather obviously wins, but Erin once again narrowly dodges death. Bubba sets off the sprinklers to make sure Jessica Biel's shirt doesn't dry out, and she arms up with a cleaver. She camps out in a locker and manages to get the jump on him, actually hacking his entire fucking arm off. She runs off into the night as Leatherface collapses, but I'm not gonna cry for the bad man. Erin finally finds a decent human being who's willing to give her a ride, but now she's so traumatized she's babbling like the hitchhiker she originally picked up. She sees the barbecue sign and freaks the fuck out, but the trucker stops with the intent of getting her the hell out of his truck. She makes a beeline to the side of the store and watches as the cannibals ooh and ah over their stolen baby. Hoyt heads over to investigate the truck, and Henrietta finds her little bundle of joy is gone. The sheriff opens the truck door but doesn't find Erin, probably because she's hot-wired his own cruiser. She runs him over 1, 2, 3 times to ensure the kill. Now she finally makes her escape with the little orphan baby in tow, and Leatherface gives her one final goodbye for the road. This brings us back to the police walkthrough, where this guy is investigating Leatherface's basement.
Come on back here, follow me.
But the boys get jump scared and killed by a one-armed Hewitt to end the movie.
This is the only known image of Thomas Hewitt, the man they call Leatherface.
And that's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah, I think rewatching it has mostly reaffirmed my positive thoughts on it. It really is a film I enjoy every time I revisit it. I do have to be in the mood for something really brutal and pessimistic, but I tend to like those films more than the average person, so that happens more frequently than some might imagine. Funnily enough, I think the remake succeeds most when it's not remaking, but actually pushing into new, interesting ideas and territory. For me, Sheriff Hoyt is what makes this film. His sadistic brand of cruel, dark humor really sets the tone. Out of all the scary Texas Chainsaw characters we've seen so far, I think Hoyt is the last one I would want to run into in a dark alley. R. Lee Ermey was perfect casting for this guy. He's a great partner in crime and father figure to Leatherface, who is also super intimidating here. This is by far the scariest depiction of what it would be like to get killed with a chainsaw. Where the original has a less is more approach, the remake bombards us with violence at every single turn. But it isn't entirely a schlock fest either, as there are some downright beautiful shots throughout the film. Some of them are borrowed from the original, but I do think Nispel and Pearl did a fantastic job capturing the beauty of the surrounding nature. Plus, there are a few stellar shots of Leatherface. That one where he's wearing Kemper's face is so unsettling. While I did really like Kemper's character, I think killing him off first was the right decision. He was the sort of middle ground between virtuous Erin and Pepper and the more self-preserving guys, and the tension that comes between those two groups really feels realistic and adds a lot of more realistic kind of humanity to both groups. They're arguments that I could genuinely buy happening in a situation like this. And Erin makes for a really great final girl. She has a surprising amount of depth and is genuinely likable, which makes it super easy to root for her against these monsters. She's realistically fucking terrified most of the time, screaming her ass off at times, but then she does eventually find the right mix of bravery and adrenaline to fight back. I'd also say this film is only behind the original and maybe part 2 when it comes to set design. This movie is dirty, wet, and stinky in all of the worst and best ways. There's also a lot of really great tension building throughout. The moments where Leatherface first appears, whenever Erin is hiding from him, and the fake out with Erin hotwiring the cop car are all super suspenseful. So yeah, there are a lot of positives here, and I definitely think it's one of the best of the franchise, but also at the same time, I don't think this is a film that I'm ultimately super passionate about. Unlike some, I don't instantly consider this film to be trash or blasphemy just because it's a remake of my all-time favorite horror movie, but at the same time, I do really value originality, so remakes are never gonna quite make it into my all-time favorite films. That point at least applies to 2000s remakes. There's obviously a few outliers like The Thing, The Fly, and The Blob. The only 2000s one that I could see an argument for would be The Hills Have Eyes, but that's a discussion for another day. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a really unique viewing experience, whereas the remake is a pretty generic slasher movie. It's a pretty good one, but generic nonetheless. Although I do really appreciate that this film was kind of the pioneer for 2000s horror remakes. That in itself is a subgenre kind of group of films that I largely dislike, but at this time, this was something kind of new, interesting, and risky to do. This one still has a lot of bite to come with its bark, unlike a lot of 2000s remakes that became overly commodified or even turned into PG-13 crap. This also came out before Saw, Hostel, and other torture porn films that would become synonymous with the 2000s, so in some ways this was also a leader when it came to excessive violence in horror movies. So while it isn't a personal favorite of mine, I have come to respect this remake for its influence on what would take place in the horror genre for the rest of that decade. All in all, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a pretty solid remake and a pretty solid horror film in its own right. It is a brutal, gory, vicious movie with a lot of violence on display. It has an effective, tense atmosphere, solid cinematography and set design, a fantastic final girl in Erin, a great new villain in Sheriff Hoyt, and a terrifying version of Leatherface. I would never ever consider putting it above the original, but it's a film I enjoy nonetheless. Well, that's about it. What do y'all think of the Texas Chainsaw remake? Do you love it? Do you think it's unnecessary? Do you absolutely hate it? Let me know down below. I'd love to have a discussion about it. Soon we'll be checking out the 2006 prequel to this film, but first we're gonna check out a mystery patron request. Thank you all so much for joining me, and an extra thank you to my patrons. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and thanks for watching Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching my review of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all my horror reviews. And if you want to help support the channel further, you should check out my Patreon account. You'd be able to vote for future movies and franchises I cover on the channel. Thanks y'all.